Hello, my name is Tomasz Poszetek, and that video is really dedicated to something awesome. So, couple of days ago, there was a discussion on Twitter, maybe not very long, but it was quite inspirational, that it is really very unlucky and unokay that we are unable to brand messages which are being sent to users who are participating in approval processes within Cloudflows. So as you know, whenever you assign a task in a Cloudflow and you mark that option to send notifications, users are receiving emails with actionable messages, which they are able simply to use to complete their tasks straight from their inboxes. And well, the other thing is that the assign a task action is as well generating an adaptive card that you can take and send to a user in a private conversation with a Flowbot, so that the user is not only able to complete the task from their Outlook, but as well from the team conversation, right? And both of these channels are branded using Power Automate logo and colors, and there is no way as of today to easily customize this branding to adopt your company's branding to implement there. So you can only use what is out of box. However, thanks to all my former investigations and work that I've done on top of Dataverse and Cloudflow approvals, it is actually possible to create your own custom handler for these approval processes and to send adaptive cards to both Teams and Outlooks yourself with your own custom branding to cover all those scenarios you can perform from the out-of-box emails and adaptive cards. However, using your own custom built layouts and look and feel. So I am really excited that I'm able now to showcase what I have built, and I really hope that it's going to inspire you to create something on your own. What is important is that this whole solution is using the actionable messages that you can learn from my other videos. It is using as well the auto invoke feature that you can learn from my previous video. It is using the automatic actions performed on approval tasks being done directly on Dataverse, which you can as well learn from my other videos. You can find all the links below in the description. And well, all these things combined together are combining all these pieces, together allowed me to create something that, as said, I really liked, and somehow it makes me proud of what I have achieved. So anyways, ready? Let me show you how it works and how it looks like, and then I'll go into details on how it was built. Okay, first I need to create a new approval process. And here I will put as an assignee John Researcher. And as a requester, I will use Stefan. Now, one small disclaimer. Yes, this whole proof of concept is only allowing me to assign a task to a single person at a time. However, there is not really much of work that has to be done to extend this scenario, and as well to allow multiple assignees to be assigned to that process. The only thing that you'll need to somehow change or develop comparing to what I've done is that the logic of the Cloudflow, which is controlling all these approval endpoints, that it's taken into consideration that there might be more than a single task assigned, and it is just checking how many tasks there are left, and if all the tasks have been completed, or if there is a rejection already received, so that it can complete the whole process, not just to complete a single task. However, in this scenario, yes, I'm only assigning the task to a single person, but as said, it is just to show you what is possible, but it's not limited to only that. All right, so here is John. John received already a task, right? You can see that the task is nicely branded. It could have the company logo. It could have a different layout than what we received straight from the Power Automate out-of-box template. But we still have the options that we do have on the Power Automate approvals. I mean, we can't reassign using Power Automate approvals, but we can using custom actionable messages. So here, John is able to approve. John is able to reject. Again, the rejection field is marked as required. And John is as well able to reassign. John as well knows who requested that approval and knows some details about that task, right? So for example, John would like now to reassign this task because he doesn't feel that he's the right person to complete it, and he would like to reassign it to myself, for example. So right now, John is reassigning the task, and the task is now reassigned. You can see that the actionable message has been updated. It is now, let's say, closed. So John is now unable to actually perform any more steps with that message. And I have already received an email with this new adaptive card, which is again actionable message, that has been reassigned to me. Now, note one thing: when I navigate to John's I'm not signed in. When I navigate to John's action items and his approvals, he doesn't have these tasks on his list anymore. Meanwhile, when I navigate to my list of tasks, I have this simple approval now assigned to me, right? And I can see in its details that it has been requested by Stefan Kowalski. And here I can either approve or reject, or I can do the same thing straight from my inbox. Now, the more important thing is that this workflow here is actually now waiting until the task is completed. So it didn't only assign a task and then complete it, and let's say all the logic is now being handled by anything else, but it is following the same behavior as you would have using only out-of-box functionalities. What is important here is that this action, the create an approval, has that parameter saying to send notifications set to false. This way, this out-of-box email is not being sent, but instead, I'm sending my own custom actionable messages. All right. So if I now complete this task either by rejection or by approval, let's say by approval, then here again, I will have this actionable message, let's say closed, with all the information that I have provided with the outcome, plus the workflow, which was waiting, has completed the way because the whole approval is completed as well, right? And here I have information about the outcome, I have information about the approver, their response, and about the comment is as well provided inside the responses array. Awesome, right? So that was like the first scenario. Let me now resubmit it again, and I will show you something different, because here I was able to, let's say, approve the task from the Outlook. However, what John could do is to as well navigate to his Teams, because despite the fact that he received that email now, that there is a new task waiting for his approval, he has as well received a notification or the private message from the Flowbot with a nice looking adaptive card requesting him to complete this process. complete the task actually. Right, so let it just load. There are lots of those adaptive cards sent already to John because I've been testing it for some time. However, this one has just been sent recently, so that is the latest one. And here again, John is able to reassign, so he would be able to, for example, type in my name and reassign it to me, or he can directly approve or reject this task from Teams. So let's say this time he'll reject. Again, sorry. Now, this task is being sent back to the host, which is this Flowbot. And thanks to the latest edition that has been released in Power Automate, I'm able to, let's say, grab a response or data from this adaptive card using a different Cloudflow. There is a new trigger when someone responds to adaptive card that unfortunately only works in a default environment, which is a kind of a limitation. So I will show you in a moment how I made it work. However, thanks to that, I am able to send this adaptive card with one process and then handle its response or handle data from that adaptive card with a second process. What is missing, what I mentioned in my previous video, is an ability to actually close this adaptive card. Because even though I was able to grab its ID, grab the message ID, I'm not able to anyhow interact with this adaptive card. I cannot close it as you saw I was able in Outlook with Actionable Messages. Here, this adaptive card is going to stay like that forever or until Microsoft implements a new action that allows me to update an existing adaptive card in Microsoft Teams. So anyways, what I was able was to grab information from this adaptive card and to simply send this kind of like a notification or the confirmation that this response has been received. Now, what is more important is the fact that this process is now completed, right? So again, there is the outcome received and everything is recorded. However, there is still a task assigned to John. So now if John opens this task again, you'll see that it has been automatically updated, showing information that it has already been completed and there is an outcome reject. And that has been done using the auto invoke functionality from Actionable Messages. So whenever a user opens an actionable message, it is sending a request to a listener that is then able to check what is the, for example, status of the approval and send a response to close this adaptive card with a new one. How do you like it? I already can feel that you're very excited that this works and it allows you to send your own custom branded adaptive cards and actionable messages, and actually to just achieve the same approval processes, the same approval process steps as you are able using the out-of-box features. However, having this awesome custom branding, right? So now I guess you're interested in learning how it was built. So let me show you in steps. Okay, the first flow, that is just a trigger task creation. This flow purpose is to, as you already know, to create a task, then to trigger this child flow, which is meant to actually assign and let's say distribute the cards to email and to Teams, and then the process is waiting for an approval. The child flow receives a couple of information as the let's say input parameters, together with this card type ID. The card type ID is that information that is being used by the latest feature added to the Cloudflows that allows me to send adaptive card to Microsoft Teams and then to create another Cloudflow which is listening for responses from cards having this ID defined. So whenever there is a response from a card with that ID, the Cloudflow listening to this ID is going to be triggered. All right, so this is the first initiating Cloudflow, which triggers the whole process. Now let me jump to the child flow that is called distribute cards in process. That's the second flow. Now I've made it a child flow because it is being used not only by the trigger process, but as well by the process which, let's say, listens to all the responses coming from actionable messages. So first step that this process is doing is getting information about the requester. So it's getting their profile, their avatar, and then it is preparing one code with adaptive card. So this is the adaptive card JSON code that is being sent to Teams. And the second one is a JSON code for actionable message that is being sent to Outlook clients, right? Differences between these two codes are significant. You can learn by watching my deep dive video about actionable messages. As well, you will learn there how to create those actionable messages yourself and how to send them to your Outlook contacts. Next, this Cloudflow is sending actionable message to the assignee with the information that is being sent, and as well, it is sending this adaptive card to a chat or a channel. In this case, to this private chat with a Flowbot, and is using this card type ID as the identifier that is being used by the trigger to be invoked whenever a response from this adaptive card is being received. And lastly, obviously, it's responding to the parent flow that has triggered it. And that's it. This is what this flow is doing. Now, the next Cloudflow that is very important in this scenario is the IM approval handler. So the actionable messages approval handler. Now, this Cloudflow is listening or is being triggered whenever a response from an actionable message is being received. So this flow is then being invoked. And what it's doing is, again, obtaining information about the requester, because if there is a scenario that the task is being reassigned, then it simply needs to have all these details about the requester. Plus, it's getting information about the request header, so information about the task process itself. And so if the task is completed, then it is sending that response that the task is completed. And this will be working in two cases. First, if this is an auto-invoke action, or if user simply has an email opened with that actionable message, which is not yet closed, but the process is closed, so they hit approve, but the process checks if the approval is completed, and if yes, then it is simply sending this new adaptive card that replaces the original one with information that the task is already completed. Now, if a task is not yet completed, then there are like three scenarios that could be performed within this approval process. So if it is approved, then the workflow is calling two child flows. The same two workflows as in the scenario of the rejection. So the first one is the workflow that is completing a task. So it's marking a task as inactive. Just small steps. So first it is calling the workflow to complete a task. And secondly, because as mentioned, I'm only handling one assignee. Therefore, after the first response, the whole approval process is simply completed. Then the second step is to call the workflow, which is just completing the whole approval process. Now, if you would like to assign this or maybe extend this whole solution so that you're assigning a task to more than one assignee, then in this second process, you would need to check how many tasks have been generated, how many are complete already, and so if the process itself should be completed already or maybe not yet, so that it should wait for another responses. And it is sending back an adaptive card that replaces the original one with information that your task has been approved. The same happens for the rejection scenario, just the adaptive card being sent is different. Then speaking about the reassignment, first the workflow is calling a sub-process that is called the reassign a task, which is doing the steps to reassign a task from one assignee to another one. Then is sending this response back to actionable message. And then again is triggering the distribute cards in process workflow, which is again sending new adaptive cards and new actionable messages to the new assignee. So that's the goal. Now, one thing you have to remember about all this logic here is that, as you remember from my other video about the auto invoke and action HTTP in actionable messages, those actions are having their timeouts. For auto invoke, the Outlook is going to wait only 4 seconds. For action HTTP, it will be waiting 15 seconds before it times out, before if the response is not received within that time. So whatever logic you would like to build around your, let's say, custom approvals, you just have to be sure that it will not really last longer than those 15 seconds or 4 seconds in auto invoke scenario. All right, and then in default case, so if there is something triggered in a way that is not being handled, then workflow is returning this action status, so that small message displayed below the card saying that there has been an error and maybe a user should try again later. And that is basically it. So this is the these actionable messages approval handler. So now let me jump to first the task, the Cloudflow, which is complete a task in approval. This workflow is following the logic that is as well performed if the user completes a task using UI approach or the out-of-box actionable message. So first, the workflow is simply marking an existing, so this record present in approval request table as inactive, so that it is, let's say, disappearing from the list of active tasks for the user. And then it is writing as well a record into the approval responses table with information copied from the request and with information about the response. So what is the outcome, what is the comment, when it was completed, and so on. And that's it. So if you extend your scenario, if you extend your mechanism, your solution to cover more than one approval response or more than one assignee, then you'll simply need to create more than one of these responses into approval response table. Okay, and then the second workflow, which is being triggered, is called the complete an approval. And this workflow, you can find more details about it in my previous videos about automatically completing approvals, is doing all these steps that are again being performed if user completes an approval from the out-of-box interfaces. So first, it is getting all the assigned tasks so that it knows how many tasks were assigned. It is getting information about the approval record itself. Then it is going through each of the responses that have been registered. So for every completed task, it is getting its details and is building a custom arrays and objects that will be then later used as the parts of the request body sent to flow notification URI. So this is what the flow is doing in this loop. So let's say building this array for each response. You can see it. Yeah, sorry, here. So if I open it, you will see that in the raw outputs, the responses is that array that is being built by the loop together with the response summary. So the response summary is like just a concatenated string of all the responses collected in that approval process, right? So we have responses and we have the response summary list. And then what it's doing is navigating to flow approvals table, where it is trying to find the flow notification URI URL that is going to be used to send that request body to. Then it is marking the whole approval as completed, because we need to set the approval header record as inactive as well and mark it as completed. Plus, we need to update the outcome, right? So we need to as well update the outcome of that approval. So with that, the whole approval process is being completed, is being done. And lastly, the workflow is composing this request body that is being then sent to the flow notification URI here. And sending that request body to flow notification URI is simply resuming the action. So this action here, that is waiting for an approval. So that request sent to the flow notification URI resumed the action. And thanks to the fact that the request body sent to this URI was having the schema expected by the action, I am able to use the dynamic outputs the same as I were able to, or the same as I would be able if I was using simply out-of-box functionalities to complete the task. Okay, that was quite simple, right? So those two flows which helped me to complete approve and reject scenarios. And now the last flow that is being triggered by that actionable message approval handler is the one that is called reassign a task, right? And so reassign a task is again doing something that out-of-box approvals would do if a task was reassigned. So first, it would create a new approval record in approval requests table with a lookup to the existing record within the approval request table. And then it would mark that existing approval request, so the old task, as inactive with a status reason reassigned, right? So the original task is disappearing from the original assignee, but the new task is being created and is being, let's say, added or displayed under the action items of the new assignee. So this is what the reassign a task Cloudflow is doing. Again, you can learn about the reassignments in the other video that you can find in my channel. All right. So with these steps, I showed you what is being done when speaking about the approvals from actionable messages. One important thing about the actionable messages that you saw as well is that this actionable message it contains that auto invoke action at the bottom, at the very, very bottom. So this piece of code is used or is being triggered whenever a user opens an email containing that actionable message. So as you saw in this case, when John completed their task from Teams and then he navigated to Outlook and opened that task in that email, the task was simply refreshed, or the actionable message was refreshed, and it was replaced with a new one saying that the approval process is completed. And that happened thanks to that auto invoke piece of code within the adaptive card JSON code. So it simply triggered the Cloudflow that you saw that is handling the actionable messages, and it checked if the approval process is completed. And because it was, it simply closed the card, and that's it. Okay. And the last piece of this whole solution is the adaptive card sent to Microsoft Teams. Now, I told you that there is a new feature that allows us to send adaptive card by one process and then grab its response by another one. And this is being done thanks to the card type ID. So here I have defined the card type ID. And in my default environment, I think it is in here. No, it is here, right? I have a flow that is called the AC approval handler. Now this flow is being triggered using a new trigger that is called when someone responds to an adaptive card. And this trigger, apart from having the adaptive card schema or the code present here, it as well contains that value under the card type ID that is being set to the same value as the cards in the process I just showed you. Thanks to that, it is being triggered whenever someone responds. So once I navigate back to the history, I will see that last time I have received a response from John Researcher who has completed his task. And here I have those card outputs with the comments, right? You saw that comment with the type of the rejection, the approval ID, this card type ID, because I will then pass it on, and the assignee and the requester, right? So all this information that was, let's say, sealed in the adaptive card by these distribute cards in the process workflow. So let me just show you. Right, so there is, for example, this rejection scenario. Here is the data that was sent to the host, and then it was, let's say, forwarded to that trigger, right? So the trigger received the approval ID, the card type ID, assignee, requester, type, and as well information from the input text, the reject comment, okay? And because this Cloudflow, I mean, this trigger, it only works in a default environment so far. I've never made it work in my other environments. So I decided to simply create like a proxy in a default environment which is triggered, and then it simply posts data to the HTTP endpoint. And this HTTP endpoint is triggering this Cloudflow, which is called the AC approval handler from preview environment or from the default environment, whatever. And this Cloudflow is again handling information from the adaptive card, right? So it is quite similar to what you saw speaking about the Actionable Messages approval handler. So here again, it is reacting on every of these three scenarios. Just its outcomes or maybe actions, steps are different. So apart from doing the same exact steps like completing tasks, completing approval, then it is replying with the information to the user under that adaptive card from which this activity was triggered, with information, with this confirmation that, okay, we received your decision. It's either approved or reject. And then speaking about the reassignment, again, it is doing the same steps. So first it's reassigning, then it's as well sending adaptive card with information to whom it was reassigned, and then triggering as well that sub-child process, which is reassigning a task. And lastly, it is sending back the response to that other Cloudflow from that other environment that has triggered it. And so this is the whole solution. It works really well. The only thing that I'm really missing, that I really miss in this whole puzzle, is that ability to close this piece of card or this card so that user is unable to click any more any button else apart from the one they clicked in the first place. And because we are unable to close this card, but it is always being opened, and user is able to still hit approve, reject, or reassign. However, the tasks underneath are already closed, already inactive, the process is already completed. So therefore, it is not possible to update them the second time and the third time. Even more, when trying to modify these contents, the processes could face errors because, for example, in case of reassignment, it is not going to be able to reassign this task again because, for example, it has been once reassigned already. So the original task is already reassigned and inactive, so it cannot be reassigned again. Or the process cannot be marked as inactive again. So if you plan to have your custom approval process built on these multi-levels as I've built mine, then apart from allowing users to let's say, be able to complete the processes from adaptive cards, you need to as well somehow build a logic which checks if the process is already completed, and only then to, well, perform actions that are possible from the adaptive card. Otherwise, to maybe send a notification that, hey, you have already completed the task, don't do that again, or something maybe more friendly. And I keep my fingers crossed that in a very, very short future, those missing actions are going to be added to the team's stack of actions, and so that we are going to be able to simply update an existing adaptive card with a new one. And with that, you will be really able to create wonderful custom branded workflows with your own custom adaptive cards, actionable messages that are really responsive, so that if you complete them from in one place, then the other one is going to be updated as well, and so on and so on. All right, so that's it. One last thing that I would like to put your attention to is that I've built this whole solution using those out-of-box features for adaptive cards and actionable messages that are called the Action Submit, Action HTTP. However, if you are a developer and if you know how to develop a custom bot, then you could as well benefit from a functionality that is called Action Execute, which is a new thing introduced to adaptive cards that works both in adaptive cards and in actionable messages. And Action Execute actually is the future for all the interactions that are going to happen within adaptive cards. It encapsulates with just one action every other type of action. So submits, posts, gets, and whatever else you can think of. However, it is sending that information back to the host, so to the bot that I mentioned you need to develop. And the bot then is aware of other cards distributed in the same process, and as well is able to manipulate them. So in a scenario that I was just showing, you would be able to close any other existing card if one was closed. You would be able to update any existing card if one was completed, and so on and so on. Or you would be able to send different adaptive cards to different participants in the same process, depending on their role in that process. And this is all happening, thanks to those universal actions and Action Execute. So read down. In the comments. In the description below, there is a link to the documentation for the Action Execute. So if you're interested in learning more, I highly recommend you, because that is the future. I personally can't do that because I'm not a developer and I can't benefit from it. But if I were, I would definitely take a look at that, because that would really unleash the full power of adaptive cards in cloud processes. Anyways, thank you very much for watching. If you have any comments, please write them down below. And as always, I ask you to subscribe, rate the video, turn notifications on for my YouTube channel. And until the next time, bye bye.